Welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast, where mental health professionals learn about the nuts and bolts of private practice by listening to the journeys of 4 therapists that have taken the plunge into private practice. And here's your host, Chris Quarto.
Hey everyone, this is Chris Quarto. Welcome again to Private Practice Journeys. This is the second special episode of Private Practice Journeys in which I paired up an expert in private practice development with one of the 4 therapists who are participating each month on this podcast series. Allison Puryear of Abundance Practice Building, and I slaughtered Allison's name on the podcast. And Allison, if you're listening, I apologize for that. But anyway, Allison joins us, and I paired her up with Lisa Duez. And Allison offers some really great advice and insights into private practice development. And I want you to listen to this. I think you guys will really benefit from this. So without further ado, here is Allison and Lisa. Hey everyone, this is Chris Quarto, and welcome again to Private Practice Journeys. Well, today I am joined by Allison Puryear of Abundance Practice Builders. And Allison, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, let me share with the Journey followers a little bit about what's going on here, because today's session was actually supposed to be 3 of us, you, me, and Lisa Duez, who's one of our 4 therapists who were kind of following their private practice journey throughout the course of 2017. And Lisa hasn't been able to join us yet. So you and I just thought we'd just kind of punt and we'll just talk to one another. How about that? Does that sound good?
Sounds fun.
Okay,
yeah.
That's great. Well, I'm kind of curious if, and I'm sure the Journey followers are too, if you could just tell us a little bit about you and what you do and how you got involved in what you do.
Oh, yeah. So I've been a therapist. I finished my MSW program back in 2004. And so I've been, in the realm since then. I'd worked at a lot of different a lot of agencies, and really didn't enjoy it. I enjoyed aspects of it, but the more bureaucratic something got, even though I'm a hardcore rule follower and I really like structure, it was the toxicity and the people not just kind of like having the conversations they needed to have with one another, and sometimes clients' needs not being put first in the way I felt they should have. So we moved across the country to Seattle from Georgia, and I was kind of like, I don't think I can do agency work anymore. Like, I just can't do it. So I had a small private practice on the side while I was working full time back in Georgia. And I was like, babe, I know you're not going to be able to work, and we're going, to have to pay for tuition and everything, but I think we're going to move across the country and I'm going to start my own business.
Wow.
And luckily he's amazing, and he's kind of, we have different risk tolerances. Like when it comes to business, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just make it happen. Whereas when it comes to like whitewater kayaking or mountain biking, he's like, yeah. And then we switch places with our risk tolerance on the other.
Sure.
So luckily he supported me emotionally, and we just kind of went for it. And so, I built a private practice in Seattle. It was probably one of the most empowering things I've ever done in my life. And just felt like private practice is where it's at. It was so fun. I got to have a great life.
How did you know how to do it? I mean, just going from agency work to private practice isn't something that you just do. I mean, how did that whole process work?
Yeah, well, this was back before there were a bunch of practice builders, right? There just weren't many of us yet. Casey Truffaut's book was out, so the Be a Wealthy Therapist. And then Lynn Grotsky had, I think her first book was out at that time. It might have been 12 Months to Your Ideal Practice. Mm-hmm. So I read those, and then I read some other kind of random business books, and just kind of knowing myself and knowing my strengths and knowing my weaknesses. Like I knew SEO was not going to be my strength. Yep. I knew that like anything technological was going to make me want to throw things across the room. And that my strength is in connecting with people. And so I networked my tail off. And in my first, as an outgoing extrovert, I needed to, so I didn't wither and die. So in my first 90 days, I met 90 people.
Holy cow.
And yeah, it was a lot, but I had nothing else to do. So it worked out. And just built from there, building those relationships with people, just built my practice essentially. And I had a great website that made my clients they couldn't find it unless somebody gave it to them. But once they landed on it, they felt connected to me and wanted to come in. So then I moved back across the country. We came back with a toddler this time. And I built here in Asheville, North Carolina, and was clear that we were going to put down roots here. And I was actually sad I wasn't going to get to start another private practice, which I was like, that's a little weird, but I'll roll with it. And so, long story long, I decided to help people start building their practices and just live vicariously through them like a stage mom.
Yeah. That's really cool because you had the experience of having developed your own private practice, and I assume that you just learned a ton. Oh yeah, having done that, and could really benefit other people. What a great way to give back to the profession.
Yeah, well, and it's so fun. Yeah. So it doesn't I never feel like I'm giving more than I have, because it's just really an exciting process to watch people grow these beautiful businesses that are helping so many people.
Oh, of course, yeah. Yeah. So what made you decide not to establish a private practice when you moved back across the country?
Oh, I did.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it filled up quickly, and I was then building this other business too, of helping people build, and was totally overwhelmed trying to do a full-time practice.
Oh, I see.
But was essentially a full-time consulting agency as well. So I've since scaled down my private practice and still have several clients that I'm going to hold on to for a while, I hope, because they're great, but not too long, because we want them to get better.
Of course.
And then I have, abundance, which is super fun.
Well, and I've listened to a couple of your episodes. You have a new podcast series out, and I've listened to that. And what I like about that is that you're doing something different on that, because if you listen to a lot of podcasts, it's the interviewer interviewing a mental health professional, and it's a different mental health professional every week, and it's just tell me about your practice and that kind of stuff, and that's interesting. But what you've done is you've kind of taken it down a different path, because the episode that I listened to, it was almost as if I was kind of listening to a consultation with a therapist, which I thought, this is fascinating, because this is fresh. It was something new. It was fresh. It was neat to me to listen to something that's just totally new like that. What gave you the idea to do this kind of a podcast for therapists?
Yeah, so it's actually it's 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And it's got a really layered thing. So the first one, the Monday episode, is a consultation, like a mini consultation with a therapist. And then the Wednesday episode, I have on another consultant. And they've listened to the Monday episode, and it's basically like, what did I miss? Like, what else would be helpful to this person? And then Friday, I kind of summarize, and I give some homework for anybody who's struggling with the same thing. And I think pieces of it were Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love and Big Magic. She's got an awesome podcast where she kind of does pieces of that all in one really long podcast. And I thought, that's a pretty good idea. How could I kind of tweak that for my audience and the people that are trying to build? So she's kind of my main inspiration in a lot of things, honestly. She's kind of like the big sister I always wanted. But she's my main inspiration for that. Okay. And I just felt like it'd be helpful, like thinking about as a student, being able to observe clinicians do their work helped me become a better clinician. And so to be able to hear other people work through their issues really cool. Around building.
That's wonderful. And it's such a nice service that you're providing to the community doing this sort of thing. So I wonder, people might be listening to this and thinking, because our audience, the Private Practice Journeys audience, is comprised of therapists who are either thinking of going into private practice or have just started one. And so they're at this point where they have a lot of questions, and they're not quite sure what they should do or how they should do it, or if they even should go into private practice. I know for a lot of them. And I'm just looking at my screen, and it looks like Lisa is trying to join us. Are you there?
Hey, Lisa.
Hey.
Hey.
Little mixed up.
Hey, not a problem at all. I just want to let the Journey followers know that Lisa Dewey is now joining our conversation. Lisa, Allison and I have been having a great conversation, just getting to know one another. She's shared with us a little bit about her background and how she got to where she is now with Abundance Practice Builders. And we're almost at the point now, I think if you would have been here from the start, this almost would have been the part where I would have started asking you questions. So you've come in at a great time. So, but it's not a problem at all, and we're glad that you're here. And before I get to more of this with you, Lisa, let me just ask Allison just another question, because we're at the point where I was kind of curious with Allison about just her whole philosophy about how she helps people like you, Lisa, in terms of developing their practices. So, Allison, if you could just kind of share what's your philosophy or what's your approach in helping people like Lisa who are starting to develop their practices?
Yeah, I think broadly my approach is you can have what you want. We just have to figure out how to get there. And that identifying what you want is the most important thing.
All right.
Because I work with people all the time who are full and miserable. So if you can get really clear about what your ideal everything is, then we can work towards that. And that just generally as well, private practice is really doable. It's not rocket science.
Right.
It's just figuring out what works for you. And that's the great news.
So really helping therapists develop clarity in who their ideal client is. I suppose that's a part of it. But what they want, both short-term and long-term, it sounds like those are really important things that you try to do with therapists. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit. Lisa, I want to invite you into the conversation now. And let's just start just by giving Allison and the Journey followers just kind of a brief review or update of where you're at in your practice, how long you've been in your practice, and what types of people that you're seeing, and just a little bit about you.
Okay, I sure will. But first of all, I guess I'm Skyped challenged. I'll apologize. I don't know what happened. I told you, Chris, I emailed you this morning about some issues with it, and my apologies. I was in a panic. I'm like, these are busy people, and I am a busy person
It's
too.
not a problem at all.
It's really okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have been, I'm a clinical social worker. I've been in full-time practice since January. Part-time probably since November of last year. April's been a big month. I don't know what happened at the beginning of April, but I just have been slammed in a good way.
Woohoo!
Yeah, sure.
Good for you.
I'm smiling too, but it's challenging. It's like, oh my gosh, what has happened? And I think what had happened is I spent a lot of time in February and March doing marketing. And I always kind of believe that marketing kind of takes a little time. Like you put your seed out there and it doesn't flourish until like about 6 weeks later.
Right.
So I got that. So I'm very happy. I have I don't know if I want to say full practice, but I have enough where I'm like, okay, this is doable. Plus I got my competency RFP finished. I know, clap. So I am at the point where I'm like, woo, the train is going very fast, kind of thing. And so I'm realizing that I probably need to look at getting some help. And I did, Allison, listen to your podcast, I think it was last week, about a VA. And I'm like, that's me. That's probably me now. And so that's it. My niche is trauma, working with women. I love working with women in addiction. I think it's a needed field. I think it's underused because I feel like if you work with women, you work with families. And so I like, you help kids too. But I also see, like I said, I see juveniles that have to be deemed competent or incompetent for the courts. And I do some consulting also. I have about 20 years of administrative experience, so I have been asked to develop programs here and there for the Virginia. And sometimes I write some policies, and, I want to keep my hand in that a little bit.
Okay.
So that's me.
Well, Allison, I'm going to turn this over to you at this point. You've heard a lot about from Lisa and sort of where she's at in her journey for private practice. And if Lisa was a client of yours, if you were helping her on this practice development course that she's on, and what types of things would you help her with, or where do you want to take this at this point?
Yeah, I guess the first thing I want to do is get really sure that you are building exactly what you want. And I would do this no matter where you are in the process, but that's just something I always do, because as you're getting more and more full, it's easier to get more stressed out. You may have taken on some clients earlier on that maybe aren't an ideal fit. And so how do we make sure anybody you take on from here on out is going to be a great fit for your practice? Trauma is heavy work. It's really hard work. So when I say ideal for your practice, I don't mean necessarily the ideal clients that we often identify before working on website copy and things like that, because an entire practice full of those folks might be too much. Yeah. So yeah, tell me a little bit about what the ideal split would look like in terms of clients who you're helping through trauma, and maybe some clients who have, I'm trying to think of a respectful way to say.
Not as much.
Not as much trauma. There we go.
Honestly, it's probably about 50-50, because trauma is heavy work. Yeah. And I know that, and it's EMDR, and it's a lot that goes into planning those sessions, and, sometimes they run over. And so I think it's about 50-50. But I also have a lot of, I think I've gotten a little bit more of some of the lighter cases that I think are flushing out now. Lighter cases, I guess is what we could call it.
Yeah.
I think I spoke with Chris about a couple podcasts ago about how I kind of started in as a generalist. I think when I had a pretty heavy administrative job, and I was okay with just, couple bereavement stuff and here and there, and now I'm, I think my niche was more defined. So it's probably, I would say, 50, maybe 60-40, but then I do enjoy doing the competency work that gets me out of the office. I get to go see kids in detention, which is fun.
I'm so glad you think so.
I'm an old probation officer, so yeah, it's
nice.
And so it's probably about that. I do know it's heavy work, and I can always tell when I've had sessions and I'm like, oh, that's been a day. So I do try to break it up.
Okay, good. Yeah. And I think this is such a great example of how we can all have, because my primary focus in my practice is eating disorders. And a lot of people are like, oh, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. So I love how the things that each of us love, it gets to be different. So yeah. Okay. So in building what you want for your life, as well as your practice, do you feel like you have the time off and the space that you want, and the time off when you want it currently?
Probably not. Probably not. You jump into it and you say, I'm just going to, you get so excited that somebody calls and you say, when can you come in? And then they come in, whenever, and you're like, oh, but I'm getting better at, defining what nights I work evenings, and then what days I'm taking a little lighter. So, but there is still that fear of, gosh, if I don't take that client, is the other one's going to come back? I'm still there. The imposter syndrome is still there a little bit.
Right. Right. And I think what you're saying, though, is like you started in January at full time. Like you're nearly full, right?
I think so. I started February full time. Yeah.
So the fact that
full.
Yeah, the fact that you're there already indicates to me like these referrals aren't going to dry up. Yeah. It's totally normal to get sucked back into that scarcity thinking, but I think looking at the evidence can really help you calm down around that, so you don't take people on at times that don't work for you.
Yeah.
And
summer's come in, and I don't want to part of the reason that I did this was to spend more time with my boys. I have 2 teenage boys, so maybe they don't want to spend more time with me, but I would spend more time with them. Uh-huh. So, and I'd like to have my Fridays off eventually, but right now my Fridays are very light. So I feel like I'm working towards it. My Mondays and Fridays are light. So that works for me.
Yeah.
Okay. For now.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I guess it comes to looking at the things that are taking up your time that you don't necessarily have to be doing, like the VA kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So that's another place of focus that we could go. What are you thinking of outsourcing?
With competency evaluations, there's a lot of follow-up with attorneys, faxing, invoicing. I do my own billing, which is fine. But I find that, when they come in and reconciling and different things like that, I'm like, oh, I have a stack on my desk now that I need to go through and scan and reconcile and make sure the accounts are right. So some accounting. I guess depending on skill level, I might talk with someone about doing some marketing, but that would kind of depend on the person. And I'm sure there's 1,000 other things I could probably think of.
And Allison, can I just interject something here? This brings up a really good issue about the whole thing about bootstrapping, because when you first start a private practice, you don't have a lot of money, and you're feeling, I need to do everything. I need to be the receptionist. I need to be the biller. I need to be the clinician. All this stuff that all of us, I think, have done that when we've started private practices. But it gets to the point when you grow that you don't have time to do all that stuff.
You don't.
But yet you don't want to, pay the money. So how do you help people reconcile those two things? Have you had that in your interactions with it? And how do you help them with that?
Absolutely. And I can say I've been there myself. Yeah. Like before I hired my first assistant, I was like, but I don't have the money to hire an assistant. There are so many things I need to do with this money. So because you get too full, you can stay up late and work too many hours, but then you may as well be in an agency job.
Right.
That's part of the reason we usually do this is for freedom. And so usually what I point out is looking at how many sessions you would need to do per month in order to pay this person.
Okay.
It's usually 2 sessions a month, up to 4 for most people. Yeah. And if that's the case, that's literally one more client, and all of the BS you don't want to do is off your plate. And to me, being able to focus on the clinical work that I really love, and taking on a client that I really enjoy working with instead of having to fax stuff sounds really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm there. I think I'm there. I'm kind of like, gosh, I got, and this is the bad thing. So if I have a cancellation, then this is what I'm going to do, instead of reading maybe some clinical stuff that I need to be reading or looking at some other things, So I want to very much concentrate on my craft as opposed to, I need to call such an insurance company or, just farming that out. Totally. I know from being an administrator that there's certain things that I just didn't do, and there's certain things I had my assistant do. So I'm there, I think. So
well, and you just spoke to something that might be a skill set for you that some other clinicians might need some help with or some contemplation time with, is that you're accustomed to delegating. And that is an awkward position to be in if you don't have any experience with it.
Yeah.
So I know when I first hired somebody, I felt guilty asking them to do something I was entirely capable of doing.
Right.
And I had to get over that because I was holding on to too much. And I was like, Allison, you're paying this person. She wants hours, give them to her. So
or it's, I want to make sure that it's done the right way. And I know that I can do it the right way, but I'm not sure this person is going to do it the right way.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That I'm having a little of that, okay, this is does that person know how to do the Theranest? And does that person know how to do, and that's all excuses on my part. You just show her how to do Theranest,
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm there. I'm putting the feelers out. I guess I'm trying to decide between hiring somebody local as opposed to hiring somebody, a remote. But I think I might actually have to go with somebody local because I have to get them to fax stuff. And here you go, fax this.
Right. It kind of takes it puts the work back on you to have to scan it all in so that they can fax it. So
I know.
Yeah.
Then I might as well just fax it.
Right. Yeah. So that makes sense. So then one thing I would really recommend is being very clear in whatever ad you're going to use about what you're looking for personality wise too. One of the things I said in my ad is no flakes. I don't tolerate that. Like I sounded like a lot more hard nosed than I am as a human being, but to me, like I'm really clear that like I want to weed out people who are gonna like half bake it. Like I don't want those people working for me because then I'm gonna feel like a nagging mom or something, and I'm not your mama. Like I have toddlers I take care of. I don't need to take care of an associate too. So, yeah. And another thing that I do is I will videotape or screen video. What is that called? Yeah. I'll record my screen as a video as I'm doing a task so that they can learn, like they can see instead of me trying to write it out. Like first you click on this and then you click on this. Right. Like if I'm telling them how to load a blog post, I can do it while I'm showing them, and I don't have to show them a million times or take the time to write it out because I just happen to need a load of blog posts anyway. So that's a good time hack.
Yeah. I think I'm there. Like I said, I just think I'm there. So
Hey, Lisa,
I'm very concerned with, what'd you say?
I just want to interrupt here. On your screen, at the bottom of the screen, do you see an icon that looks like a camera?
Yeah.
Does it have a line through it?
Yeah, if you can't see me.
Can you click on that?
Now you can see me.
We will in a sec.
Yeah,
there we
go.
My
office.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't see you.
Yeah, see how Skype challenged I am? I thought I had it, but I guess I don't. See me now?
Yeah. We can see you now. Yep, we can see you. Yep. So Allison, these are some of the things you've heard from Lisa about some of the things that she's doing, and you've given her great advice, some things. Now, in terms of moving forward, Lisa is in about probably the 4th month, I think, of her private practice, just kind of moving forward in addition to the virtual assistant. Do you see any other things that she could do or things that she should be planning for her practice?
Yeah, that was my question. Great minds.
Okay, yes.
So I'm also concerned about sustainability. I've jumped off and I've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
I do. I think I'm very fortunate. I read people's blog posts, people's stuff, and I'm like, you should just shut up. Stop getting anxiety because I have 30 appointments booked this week.
Ooh.
Wow.
Well, did you say you're not full at 30 appointments?
I don't even know.
Lisa, we got to talk some more.
Yeah, no, I'm full, but there's still of like, what's next week going to look like? Or, I tend to have busier every other weeks because some people are on biweekly therapy now. So I think that's just a pattern for me, which I don't know. But so I'm like, how do I sustain? What do I keep doing? Do I keep doing what I'm doing, or do I keep doing something else, or should I add something, or
Well, what you're doing is working in terms of getting clients in the door. In terms of sustainability, not for your practice, but for you. I would love to see fewer than 30 clients a week, personally.
Yeah, probably.
So part of that might be on those weeks where you've got all your every other week people like all stacked up together. I'd see if you could shift them into kind of like shared spots, like maybe Wednesdays at noon are your every other week spots, and Jane Doe is the 1st and 3rd week of the month, and John Doe is the 2nd and 4th. So if you can get them in that way, when like you'll have more slots for every week people, not now, not at 30 people, but so that's one thing I'd suggest. I'd also look at how much you're making per session, seeing like in terms of financial sustainability, because if you feel like you need to see 30 plus people a week, I don't know if that's because you really love this client population and you don't want to say no to them. I don't know if that's like you want to make your mortgage and have money for a vacation. So I'd also just look at the financial piece and whether or not all the insurance panels you are on are working for you, or if
Yeah,
you can bring in more private pay.
Yeah, I did go ahead and cut myself off of a couple EAPs that I was in the beginning, just because to get yourself building, because they just don't pay enough.
Yeah.
Lisa, let me just ask, what percentage of your practice is private pay compared to insurance panel?
I am probably about 90% insurance.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of private pay. I have a colleague over here that has it, and I know it's probably the way to go in the future, but right now I'm still insurance.
Mm-hmm. And insurance is like having your own marketing company working for you, right?
Yeah.
Like you're paying a little bit for them every session because the price is probably lower than your private pay rate, but they're getting clients in your door. So, no harm, no foul.
No,
your
it's not. I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah. And if your ultimate goal is to get off insurance panels and be private pay, that's available too. When it feels right, you'll have built up your reputation as a private practitioner because you'll have a lot more word of mouth. It might be with a population that might not be able to afford you, but it might also be with clients who can afford you. So yeah. So sustainability wise, I'd look at that. I'd look at maybe continuing to get off any panels that don't pay you an amount that feels sustainable.
Yeah.
What else is so summer is usually a slower time for folks, especially if your population takes a lot of vacations.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that's kind of welcome because you're wanting to spend more time with your sons.
Yeah.
But so I'd say like see that coming, and it may not come for you because you've built up really quickly, and that could just maintain. But if it happens, it's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's not because your practice isn't going to be sustainable. It's just because it's summer and people would rather be at the pool.
Yeah,
so,
and I don't blame them. It's
right. Yeah, exactly.
Allison, when people are first going into private practice, do you recommend that they get on insurance panels, or what if they just want to do self-pay? Is that realistic for a person to go into private practice and only do self-pay? I mean, these are some questions that I think people have too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm pro whatever the person wants.
All right.
If somebody wants to take insurance, I'll usually ask around a little bit to see if that's fear-based. Like, I'm afraid I won't get clients if I don't take insurance versus like, no, it's a part of my practice's ethos. It's what like feels right to me as a social worker or whatever. And if it's more personal ethics based, then I'm like, yeah, all about it. If it's based in scarcity, then we kind of dig around some more.
I'm okay with being on insurance panels right now. The ones around here pay pretty well. So I'm okay with it. I think I need to look at it eventually and find out, dump a couple of them. But the ones out here are okay.
Good.
The reimbursement is good.
Good. Yeah. And I think the ease of the relationship with the insurance company, like if they pay quickly and the amount they pay, really, I mean, it varies so much all over the place. And so if they're easy and they pay well, and it feels right, then absolutely. When they're a pain in the neck or, they're paying $60 a session or something, like that's usually a problem because people end up really resenting them and the 3 hours they spend waiting on hold. But it is absolutely doable to answer your question, Chris. It's totally doable to start a private practice that's private pay. Just there needs to be a lot more intentionality around marketing, a lot more getting your name out there. And there tends to be a little bit more fear because there's that sense of like, I don't know if somebody will really pay me this much money. Right. I don't know if I'm really worth it. Right. And the answer is like, of course you're worth it, but like we all have to go through that a little bit and come out the other side.
Yeah.
That's that imposter syndrome that you were talking about before, Lisa.
It's a real thing. I never had it until I started private practice. Fun.
It's crazy, right? Nothing like building a business for self-development.
Exactly. Yeah. I was like, I didn't have it when I was an administrator at all. I'm like, what is this stuff?
Yeah.
Allison, if somebody's out, listening to this podcast, they might be interested in working with you. And I'm kind of curious just about how the whole process works too. I mean, is it just a one-time deal where they talk to you, or is it an ongoing process? To kind of describe how that process works as a consultant.
Yeah. So I used to do one-offs and 3-session packages until I realized it's kind of like 1 to 3 sessions of therapy. Like it eases some of the stress, but it's not always going to like fix the issue.
Right.
So at this stage, I have 2 different packages. I have an individual strategy package that's great for go-getters who just want to make sure they're putting their energy in the right place.
Okay.
And so we work together for a month. And in the midst of that month, there's one 3-hour meeting where like we really just like strategize the heck out of everything for 3 straight hours. But my primary offering is my abundance practice building groups. And those are weekly meetings for 3 months. And they're limited to 8 people. So it's super intimate and really vulnerable and fun and hard and all of it. So
would that be kind of considered a mastermind group, or the idea of a mastermind group?
It's a little bit different from a mastermind because there's a curriculum that I built that we follow.
Okay.
And they have like 1 million things of homework in between each session. So it's almost like a class, but there is some process and
it's more structured. And I'm sure that a lot of people would really appreciate that too, starting in private practice, to have something defined like that that they can go through with your help, with your assistance. I'm sure that they would really like that.
Yeah, they're really fun. And I love that the groups often will keep in touch for like, I've got some people who are still together like 2 years later, just getting together
Is that right?
Once a month. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
It's fun.
Well, Lisa, do you have any other questions for Allison at this point?
I think that I'm glad I kind of processed the VA stuff out. I think it kind of affirmed that it's probably my time. The sustainability, I got some good feedback on that. That's basically my thing. It's like you feel yourself going, okay, this is really good, but you are working your butt off right now. And that's not so good.
Yes.
So I want to be to the point where I think that my big transition will be to get a little helper and then, go from there. So
Awesome.
I don't think
That's
so, but I do know where to find you if I need you.
Awesome.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that as we wind this up. Lisa, let's just start with you. If anybody wants to get a hold of you or check out your website, how can they do that?
It's lisadewey.com, so it's a different last name. It's Duez. Lisa's the same, and I'm in Virginia Beach, providing services for women in trauma and addiction, and I'm on Facebook. That's the same last name, and Psychology Today, and all the different ways to get in touch with people.
Wonderful. And Allison, how about you? If anybody wants to consult with you or check out your Facebook group, anything like that?
Yeah. So my website is abundancepracticebuilding.com. And then I've got a Facebook group full of some really awesome people, and that's Abundance Practice Builders. If you kind of search that in the Facebook search bar, you'll find it there.
And I am a member of that group, and I am glad I'm a member of that group.
Yeah, that's been the best group.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I would highly encourage any of the Journey followers to check that out.
I learned everything from that group.
Yeah.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. It's nice. And it's a very supportive group as well. And
it is.
I really appreciate that aspect of it. So we'll put all this into show notes, so if anybody wants to check that out, they can. And Allison, thanks so much for being a part of this today as our guest expert. And Lisa, of course, I really appreciate you. As I've said, that this is a big commitment on your part, and the other 3 therapists we're doing these podcast interviews every month throughout the course of 2017, so we can kind of give the Journey followers a flavor of what it's really like to develop a private practice and develop it. So I really appreciate you coming on too.
Oh, no problem. It's been really good.
Okay. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. All right, that was really cool, wasn't it, to listen to Allison and Lisa? And it's always nice for me just to kind of be a bug on the wall and to listen into these conversations. It's nice to find out how these experts in private practice development go about helping therapists who want to develop their practices. So I really appreciate both of them coming on the podcast today. And the thing that I really liked about the way that Allison went about this was not only helping Lisa just develop her practice, but looking out for her best interest as a professional. I mean, looking at the whole aspect of Lisa's clientele, women in trauma, and how this can take an emotional toll on you if you're not careful. So looking at this and maybe looking at the relative percentages of clients who have the trauma background and those who don't, looking at things like the percentage of insurance clients compared to private pay clients. I think all these are great issues to take into consideration as a therapist develops their private practice. Also, the whole issue of outsourcing. I think Lisa's probably at a point now, she has a lot of clients she sees each week, and it's hard to take care of all those administrative tasks when you're seeing clients. And of course, isn't that what we all want to do, is to see clients, not to worry as much about that other stuff. So the whole concept of outsourcing, I think that was a good discussion as well. Well, if you'd like the show notes for today's episode and to get the links to both Allison and Lisa's Facebook pages and their private practice websites, go to my website, chrisquarto.com. It's CHRISQUARTO. And you get that information there. Also, if you want to listen to any of the past episodes of Private Practice Journeys, you can get it there too. Now, we have a couple of more therapists who are going to be paired up with experts in private practice development in the upcoming weeks. Next week is not one of those weeks, however, because I couldn't make the schedule work out right. So I'm going to do something special and have another expert in private practice development, John Clark. I'm just going to have a conversation with him and talk about how he got involved in this area and what he does to help therapists who want to go into private practice and develop their practices. So make sure and listen to that. It's a great interview. Other than that, have a great rest of the week.